Hello and welcome to Big Jeff's Football Insights every Thursday on the Big Ten Huddle, brought to you by FanDuel. We are part of the Believe podcasting network. I'm your host, Big Jeff McMichael, pre-recorded earlier on Thursday. Very exciting show for you today. Got really a couple special topics. Things really get real as we approach the first playoff game that will be tomorrow night. So just super exciting as always. We pride ourselves in covering the Big Ten across all teams, and we were talking about prioritizing some of the bowl games and everything. So definitely exciting time for everyone across the Big Ten, and those who are in bowl games especially. The agenda for this week. So there's 4 items I'm going to cover. We did have one bowl game already. That's Washington against Boise State. I did predict that. So just going to talk to that game a little bit and give some takeaways. Second topic will be predicting the first round playoff game between James Madison and Oregon, of course. That will be Saturday night. Number 3, so this is my special topic of the week. It's going to be a pretty cool one. I'm going to look at the Talent Composite Index and recruiting rankings of all 12 playoff teams, and then draw some implications from that. We're also going to look at, I had done a podcast over the summer looking at the past 20 national champions and what their recruiting profiles looked like. So it's going to be interesting to kind of compare that information to the 12 playoff contenders. And then the fourth and final thing is under the category Big Jeff's General Insights. Going to look at all the bowl games and give the priority for which ones are the most important for the Big Ten, most important to the least important Big Ten bowl games. So we're going to get into all that. Should take less than an hour. We'll see how long it takes. Final reminder, I do plan to have most, if not all, this information and tables in an article as usual on bigjeffsfootball.com. So please look for that, and that will be posted by tomorrow morning. All right, so with that, let's get to it. And you can see here I got this table of all the different bowl games. For the regular season, my projections, I end up coming 30-30 for the year. So I'm just thinking for the bowl season and for the playoffs, let's put that into a different category. So for the first week, last week, we had Washington beating Boise State. I did pick that, Washington to cover the 9.5. So I'm 1-0 on the year so far. That's a good thing. And in this table, the Big Ten team, of course, is going to be in light green so that you can see, and I highlighted where on the left, any SEC team is in the light brown background cell. And the other thing with this, of course, we're going to be talking great depth. Bowl games matter a lot for perceptions of conferences. So, some people might think, oh, these bowl games aren't that important and everything, especially if you're playing a lower level team. Believe me, they do matter. The SEC's record in bowl games is going to be compared to the Big Ten's and all other conferences. So it really matters what our record is in comparison. So let's just talk topic 1 from the agenda, talk about what I got right in that Washington game. It was the bucked up LA Bowl, Washington a 9.5-point favorite. I had Washington winning 35-21. They won a lot easier than that, 38-30 over Boise. Very impressive. Key to that, Boise had 5 interceptions. Two thrown by their starter, Madison, and 3 by his backup, Max Cutworth, his name is. Washington only had 1 turnover. They had a fumble. So Boise was -4 in turnovers. That was really the story of the game. You're not going to win much doing that. Madison did enter the game with a lower leg injury, and so he only played the first half before sitting out the second half. So that really impacted Boise State for sure. Just a couple factors in this game. I had said Washington with the 5th best run defense, giving up only 140 yards per game. I thought they would shut down Boise's rushing attack, and that turned out to be exactly right. Washington only gave up 58 yards rushing and at 2.1 yards a carry. So very impressive. The other thing is that was key. Washington, all their key players played, including wide receiver Denzel Boston. He's projected by many to be a first-round draft pick. He had a big game, 6 catches for 126 yards, a 78-yard TD in the second quarter, which was really big. I think that put them up 10-3. The other thing is I said Washington had a huge advantage at the quarterback position, and that was exactly the case this year. And similar to last year, Damon Williams Jr., he had a big kind of bold breakout game last year, which got everybody really excited about Washington for this year. Well, he was probably equally good this game, 215 yards passing, 4 touchdowns for him. So it really did turn out that, Washington's advantage at the quarterback position was huge. Jonah Coleman, big game, 85 yards rushings and a TD. And then, the other factor is I did like Washington. I felt they would be highly motivated in this game, despite the speculation that Jedd Fisch could be a candidate for the Michigan job, and he still is a candidate for that. So it's pretty impressive for them to win against a strong program like Boise State with some of those distractions tied for Fisch. Now, assuming Fisch stays, I think this game could be a big springboard for Washington next year. They should go into next year if Fisch stays thinking we should be making the playoffs next year. Anything less than that would be a disappointment, I would believe, for Washington. All right, let's talk about topic 2, which is the playoff game tomorrow night. So we've got Oregon, and all the odds you're seeing in this table here, by the way, are per FanDuel, of course, who is a sponsor of ours. But the FanDuel odds have Oregon as a 2.5-point favorite over James Madison. It is in Eugene, Oregon, so it's a home game. 48.5 is the over-under. I think I have that listed wrong here in the table. It's 48.5. It went down, I believe, in the more recent FanDuel statistics. Just a background. So Oregon, of course, you should know, but just a reminder, 11-1 overall, 8-1 in the Big Ten. Their only loss at home, 30-20 to number 1 ranked Indiana. So they finished third to themselves in the Big Ten. James Madison finished 12-1 overall. They were 8-0 in the Sun Belt standings, and then they won the East Division in the Sun Belt, played Troy for the Sun Belt Championship, and they won that game 31-14. Interesting ESPN SP Plus metric. Oregon is ranked number 4 overall. All year long, Oregon has been ranked very high in SP Plus. Oregon has the number 5 ranked defense as well in the nation per SP Plus. James Madison, though, I was really surprised. They're ranked number 24 by SP Plus. That includes a 22 ranking on offense in the nation and 27th in defense. When you think about that as an example, James Madison is ranked even better than Michigan in SP Plus. They have Michigan number 27 in this metric. And then if you look at the SP Plus ranking points, James Madison is only 12.9 point aggregate difference between Oregon. So that's what Bill Connolly, who runs that metric, he would probably say, on a neutral field, JMU should only be a 13-point underdog to Oregon. So probably a lot closer than people thought. It is closer than I thought. Pro Football Focus has Oregon rated number 2 in the nation with a 38th toughest schedule. James Madison is 16th, according to Pro Football Focus, so even better than SP Plus. Only the 109th hardest schedule in the nation for JMU. But needless to say, JMU extremely well and respected by the metrics. Now, because JMU is in a lower level conference with no common opponents to Oregon, this is a hard evaluation for sure. As usual, I like to take reasons why to take one team and the other. So I have 3 reasons to like Oregon to cover the 21.5. So number 1, I think just based on last year's playoff game in the Rose Bowl, of course, they got thumped by Ohio State. I think it was 41-21 in the round 2 game. It was the second game for Ohio State, the first game for Oregon, so there might have been a rust factor there. But I think based on that, Dan Lanning is going to have his Ducks team hyper-focused on getting out to a really good start in this game to set the tone. And the Ducks will play, I think, in this game also with a big chip on their shoulder, based on that result on last year, finishing third in the Big Ten. They have a lot to prove, and I think you're going to see that in the way they play, and it's going to be helped playing at home. So that's number one for Oregon to like them. Number two, to like Oregon, if James Madison is not able to run the ball and falls behind, and by the way, they run the ball very well, and we're going to talk to that a couple times in a few minutes here. They simply don't have the type of passing offense to allow them to play catch up with a team like Oregon. So I think that's going to increase the chances that Oregon can stretch the lead and likely maybe get some JMU turnovers potentially. So let's dig a little deeper in that one. So James Madison, their passing offense, 203 yards per game. That's only 10th in the Sun Belt Conference, 92nd best passing offense in the nation. So again, if they get behind, they're going to have a hard time coming back throwing the ball. Their quarterback, Alonza Barnett III, he's a junior, completing only 60% of his passes. So, in today's game I spoke to last week, the Boise State quarterback had a poor completion percentage. That is not good if you're 60% or so in today's game. 2,500 passing yards for him, 21 TDs, 8 interceptions, and he's been sacked 18 times. So that's quite a bit. JMU's top receiver, only 541 total yards with 5 TDs. So that really points to how the Dukes are not explosive in the pass game. They do have the 5th best rushing offense in the nation, though, for James Madison. But Oregon, against the run, number 6 in the Big Ten, and 20th in the nation in rushing defense. So they only give up 107 yards per game for Oregon. And that's crazy. 107 yards per game, and that's 6th best in the Big Ten, which shows you how good these Big Ten defenses are against the run. Oregon only gives up 3.2 yards per carry. And that includes, they faced some formidable rushing attacks in the Big Ten, Penn State, Indiana, and Iowa. So the Ducks are big and physical up front. If the run fails for JMU, the Ducks defense is very good against the pass. So number 3 in pass defense in the Big Ten. And then finally, I mentioned if Oregon gets ahead, JMU might have turnovers if they're throwing. JMU only -1 in turnover margin. That's 76th in the nation. Oregon is +8. So that's 18th in the nation. So I just think JMU is more susceptible to having turnovers than Oregon. That could add to the number of possessions for Oregon, which would be a good thing and potentially covering that big spread. Number 3, Oregon is excellent in the trenches. It's really going to be hard for JMU to match that physicality over 4 quarters. I just think, the Big Ten is a physical conference. Along with Indiana and Ohio State, Oregon might have the best defensive front and offensive line. And that's going to be a major problem for a team from a group of 5 conference like JMU is. And then Oregon's running game, 2nd in the Big Ten in rushing offense, 14th in the nation, averaging 218 yards per game, 5.8 yards per carry, which is 5th in the nation. That really strong running game is going to be tough for that good James Madison defense. So let's get into James Madison. 3 reasons why they might cover. They have a dominating defense. They really do. Excellent against both the run and the pass. Their strength on offense is their running game. So that combo, a great defense with a running game, there is a scenario here where JMU could, contain Oregon's scoring, leverage that running game to shorten the game, limit possessions, and get it into the 4th quarter where maybe they can, either pull off an upset or keep it close. So I'm just spelling out the scenario here where JMU could potentially cover that 21.5. So on defense, 1st in the conference, they yield just 16 points per game only. They're first in total defense in their conference, 248 yards per game only. First in pass defense in the conference and 12th in the nation, giving up only 172 passing yards a game. And then finally, first in the conference in run defense. They only give up 76 yards per game. That's second in the nation. So this defense is legit. And then on offense, they're first in the conference in rushing, 246 yards a game. That's fifth in the nation. They average 5.6 yards a carry. And again, that's 12th best in the nation. So really, this is the type of team in James Madison Big Ten fans would appreciate. They kind of remind me of a Big Ten West type of team more than anything. And that can add up to a close game. Number two, why you can like JMU. The aggregate statistics that we read earlier say this game should be closer than the 21.5 point spread. So I mentioned SP plus, PFF, all those metrics. This is a good football team. And then the third factor, the JMU coach, Bob Chesney, he took over for Curt Cignetti. Cignetti used to coach James Madison. Hopefully you all knew that. Left 2 years ago to become the head coach at Indiana. So JMU of any team understands, how Indiana and Cignetti has parlayed, believing in your process, believing you can win and beat big teams, no self-imposed limitations. I think JMU could tap into that and have a real belief that they can play toe-to-toe with a team like Oregon. Belief in sports is just so important. And think about it. Indiana, and Cignetti went into Oregon and beat them by 10, right? So why not JMU? Why can't JMU compete there? So that's just something to think about. So what's my call on this? I do want to call out some wild card aspects to this game. Of course, Chesney taking over, being named the UCLA coach. You do have the question, how locked in is he going to be? And his coaching staff in prep for this game. They're going to want to win, but have they been able to put in the necessary time needed to pull out an upset like this? For Dan Lanning, he faces some similar issues. He's not going anywhere, but both his coordinators, Josh Lapoy going to California, Will Stein going to Kentucky. So two of his coordinators going to fairly high profile jobs. Have they put in the time needed to properly prepare for JMU? It's a hard thing to do two jobs at once. And then for James Madison, similar to Indiana last year, this is the big stage. Will they be ready for it? It's on the road at Oregon. How are they going to react to being on the big stage like that? And so I have not seen JMU play this season. My confidence is not going to be super high in this one, but I am going to call for the reasons earlier that I think this is just a big game for Lanning. They know they need to get out to a big, quick start. I like the Ducks to win and cover the 21.5. I have it Oregon 38, James Madison 13. So that'd be a 25-point win. I give that a confidence of medium. So just a couple other comments on the playoffs. So I'm not going to give, game by game on the playoffs. Part of the reason is I've been so focused on watching Big Ten games. I haven't seen many of these other teams play, so it's hard to predict. I do think, though, if you had to ask me, I do like Oklahoma beating Alabama. I just like them at home. Obviously, I like Oregon winning. And then ultimately, if I had to choose a bracket, I do like Ohio State and Indiana making it to the finals. In the semifinals, I see Ohio State beating Georgia. I see Indiana beating Oregon and Oregon making it. So I'm just kind of declaring where I stand before this whole thing starts. And then Ohio State against Indiana, and we'll see when we get there. But I just believe it's a great wake-up call that Ohio State had. Everyone's been telling how great they were. They beat Michigan. They had the issue against Indiana of, a lot of distractions. Brian Hartline, the offensive coordinator, taking the job, the new coaching job he has. And so I just think they're going to be hyper-focused. But I see a great game there, and I would see Ohio State beating Indiana for the third straight title for the Big Ten Conference, which would be awesome. All right, so that's my first two topics. Let me buzz out of here, and I'm going to bring up and we're going to talk about my special topic here, which is pretty cool. We're going to look at the recruiting rankings and the Talent Composite Index for all 12 playoff teams and draw some implications off of that. So those who are watching this, whether it's YouTube, you can see the table here. Those who aren't, I'll try to talk you through this as well. But just a little background here, in the new landscape of college football with NIL, the transfer portal, topic you're hearing is now in podcasts and discussions. How has the importance of recruiting changed given the NIL and transfer portal, and how important that is for all these programs? I think anybody who knows college football, they will not pretend that recruiting is way overrated and doesn't matter. It has always been the lifeblood of consistently great football teams, and frankly, Big Jeff's insights and everything I've done has been, what does the data say on this and everything? And back in July, I did a podcast about the level of recruiting needed to win a national title. So I looked at the prior 20 national champions and looked at, what were the recruiting minimums of those 20 champions. And I think it's helpful to look at this before we talk to the recruiting levels and the talent for our 12 playoff teams. I think it's important to review that information and to point out before I go into it that Indiana of the 12 has the second worst 4-year average recruiting ranking. They're ranked, if you take the last four classes, Indiana is 51st in the nation as far as their average recruiting class. So just keep that in mind. Okay. So the last 20 national champions, here's the summary data. 16 of the past 20 national champions, so that's 80% of them, have had a 4-year recruiting average national rank of 7.8 or better minimum. So 16 of 20 have been at least about 8th on average national recruiting 4-year average or better, right? Tells you recruiting matters a lot. 19 of the 20 national champions also had at least 2 of the prior 4 recruiting classes in the top 20, right? So almost all of them had 2 of the prior 4 classes in the top 10. The lone exception was 2016 Clemson. They're the only one. Number 3, the 4-year recruiting average national rank of all 20 of those national champions was 5.9. So on average, those 20 had about 6th in the nation as a 4-year recruiting average. That's really high, right? And it shouldn't be that surprising for those that follow recruiting. Number 4, for the 4 schools of the past 20 that did not average in the top 10 in recruiting average, they still recruited at a high level, though. So the 4 outliers average 4-year recruiting was 12.3 in the nation, 10.8, 12.8, and 14.8. And I'm going to tell you who those 4 schools are in a minute here, because the 4 teams that did not have that top 10 average recruiting ranking, the one characteristic they did have is they had an elite level quarterback that was playing elite throughout the season and in the championship, in the playoffs, if you will. And that quarterback of those 4 was drafted no worse than the number 12 pick in the first round. So the 4 outliers were 2023 Michigan. J.J. McCarthy was the 12th pick to Minnesota. Michigan, again, was not a top 10 average recruiting class, but they were top 15, as were all 4 of these outliers. The second outlier, 2018 Clemson, that was Trevor Lawrence when he was a freshman. He was the number 1 pick to Jacksonville. The third outlier, 2016 Clemson. That was the Deshaun Watson year. He was the number 12 pick to Houston. And then the final of the four outliers was 2011 Auburn. Cam Newton, the number 1 pick to Carolina. He was basically Superman that year. If you looked at his stats, they were just crazy high. So again, that analysis showed recruiting was huge, and all of which shows the prospect of Indiana winning a national title this year with a 4-year recruiting average of 51 would just say how unprecedented truly that is. And yet, yes, I get that and I'm an Indiana fan, to remind everyone for the umpteenth time, they've been amazing leveraging the transfer portal, but other people have done that and done well, but they haven't come close to winning a national title, really. So it's just hard to do based on all transfer, on just getting transfers. And I just think in general, I'm going to hit on this more. This is why people who know college football have had a hard time believing in Indiana, because they know if you don't have that core recruiting, which is the kind of the anchor for your team, where you can supplement with transfers, but without that core recruiting, people just think, how can Indiana be doing this? I just don't understand how they can, and that's why it's such a great story. So let's look at the 12-team playoff teams now and how they've recruited and look at their talent. So in this table, I have all 12 playoff teams. It's an order of the seeding from 1, Indiana, all the way down to 12, James Madison. At the bottom, I also list the first 4 teams out. And then I show each team's 4-year average. It's the 247 sports composite that's being used for this recruiting ranking average. That's shown in the first column with all the figures. Then the next column over, the 247 sports talent composite ranking for 2025. So that's a ranking of the combination of, your existing team roster based on their recruiting rankings, plus the portal rankings of players you brought in. That's what that talent composite ranking is indicating. And then the last column is the difference between the talent composite national ranking and then the playoff committee final playoff ranking. So what does the data show? Let's first look at the 2 group of 5 playoff seeds. So those are the last 2 seeds, since they are clearly outliers. And really, the only reason they're there is because everyone was looking to set up a system to make this inclusive. So we ended up with 2, group of 5 teams among the 12. James Madison is the number 12 seed. They're, of course, playing Oregon, as we talked about. Their 4-year recruiting average, 141st in the nation is James Madison. Now, there's only 134 FBS teams, so that 247 composite looked at the FCS teams as well, so they're worse than some FCS teams. So it really is kind of crazy. The talent composite index for James Madison is 127. And if James Madison really is competitive with Oregon, given these statistics, that's going to take a big hit to the importance of recruiting rankings. It's just going to say that it's not important, but it's going to be like, wow, how did they do this? And you'll have to wonder how good these rankings are, at least from the James Madison perspective. Tulane's number 11 seed. They were ranked 20th by the committee, but 11th as the seed. Their figures look more reasonable. 4-year recruiting average of 71 in the nation. Their talent composite index is 68th. But still, it does show Tulane should be having a real hard time, competing with Ole Miss in that game. And I just think, with 2 group of 5 teams making the field, you can count on the playoff changes coming with some minimum standards to make the field. I think it could look something like, a group of 5 team has to be at least in the top 20 in the committee's rankings, and they might say we're only going to allow 1 group of 5 team. You probably can count on that coming, because money talks here. So let's focus next on the top 10 seeds data. First, looking at the 4-year average national recruiting rankings. So of the top 10 playoff seeds, 6 of the 10 have a 4-year average national recruiting ranking of number 10 or better in the nation. So six of the 10 again are top 10 recruiting teams is basically what I'm saying. The top 2 are both Georgia and Alabama. Georgia and Alabama both have a 4-year average of second in the nation when it comes to average recruiting ranking. Ohio State comes in next. They're third highest in recruiting ranking. Their 4-year average is fourth in the nation. Fourth best in recruiting is Oregon. So Oregon as your number 5 seed is fourth best in recruiting. Their average is 8th in national recruiting average. And then Oklahoma and Miami, their average 4-year recruiting ranking is 10th. Again, so all those teams I just mentioned are all top 10 recruiters over the last 4 years. Texas A&M, they're your number 7 seed. They're 11th in average recruiting over the last 4 years, so still really high for them. Ole Miss, who is our 6th seed, they're as far as recruiting, their average is 22nd in the nation, so not super high, but still good. So really, 8 of the 10 playoff seeds are in the top 22 in recruiting. I think that's interesting. And then looking at the first 4 out, so you had Notre Dame as the first team out. They're 10th in average recruiting ranking. Texas was the 3rd team out of the playoffs. They're 4th in recruiting rankings. And the outliers there, Vanderbilt was the 4th team out. They're 50th in recruiting average. BYU was the 2nd team out. They're 58th in recruiting average. So just in those top 10 seeds, there are only 2 big outliers. So let's look at those. Texas Tech is your number 4 playoff seed. They're only 34th in national recruiting. Now, Texas Tech is known they brought in some strong portal candidates, and they're playing big money also for some big-time freshmen on their defensive line. And then, of course, the number 1 seed, Indiana, 51st in their 4-year average recruiting ranking. Again, it's why it's such a shock they're doing what they're doing, and it's why Cignetti, rightfully so, just won, Coach of the Year for the second time in a row. But to me, this data does support still high-level recruiting still matters a lot, just not as maybe much as it is in the class in the past, I should say. Key to this though is to see how Indiana does in the playoffs. And then Texas Tech as well, right? Because they're our biggest outliers. So, but to me, it doesn't say recruiting's not important. It just might not be as important as it used to be. Let's look at the Sports Talent Composite Index information, focusing mostly on those top 10 seeds. So 5 of the top 10 seeds are in the top 10 when it comes to Talent Composite. So Georgia is ranked as has the most talent according to that metric, number 1. Alabama is number 2 in Talent Composite. Ohio State is number 3. Oregon is at number 5. And then Texas A&M is at number 8. So again, 5 of the top 10 seeds are in the top 10 when it comes to that metric of Talent Composite. If you look out to the top 25 in the Talent Index, we add in 3 more teams. So you're going to get Oklahoma ranking 14th in total talent in the nation. Miami ranks 15th in total talent, and Ole Miss ranks 21st in total talent. So 8 of the top 10 seeds rank in the top 25 as far as the Talent Composite Index. So probably not surprising there. So the outliers, number 4 seed Texas Tech, similar to the recruiting rankings, they're 29th in their rated Talent Composite. So not bad, but certainly that makes them an outlier. And then Indiana. So their Talent Composite Index, number 72 in the nation. And yet here they are, lowly Indiana, poor old Indiana, 13-0 in the nation, ranked number 1, just beat Ohio State. It really, this data, it just really supports how, the Indiana story, it's got to be the greatest story in the history of college football, what they're doing. They don't even need to win the national championship. To me, it is right now, just what they're doing. Obviously, if they make a long run and win it all, that will cement this even more. It's one of the best stories in sports ever, too. I don't think that's hyperbole, really. It's just shocking. And the numbers back it up even more. Everyone talks about the most losingest team in college football. Now Northwestern has taken over that mantle since Cignetti's been winning so much in the last 2 years. Really just truly incredible. Just a couple other thoughts on this. I have less confidence in this talent composite index for 247 sports. I'm not saying it's worthless data or anything, but I don't give it as much credence, for example, as the national recruiting rankings. I just think it's harder to evaluate that talent composite index, factoring in recruiting rankings and then ranking transfer people and giving them a ranking and then adding it up to come up with the overall rank for a team. I just think it's hard to do. And it's why I really don't believe Indiana has anywhere near the 72nd best talent. Just watch them. Yes, their coach great, but their players are really talented. Many of them are going to get drafted this year. So really, I have much more faith in the recruiting services who've been doing this year after year and really honing in on their rankings. Circling just back to my recruiting data for the past 20 national champions, if you loosely stick to that criteria, so let's just say take only teams with at least a top 15 average 4-year recruiting ranking can win a natty. So let's assume that, right? Because 20 of the last 20 have met that criteria. Again, 20 of the last 20 national champs have recruited at least top 15. But if you assume you have to be top 15, there's 7 teams of the 12 that can win it all. That's number 2 seed Ohio State, number 3 seed Georgia, number 5 Oregon, number 7 Texas A&M, number 8 Oklahoma, number 9 Alabama, and number 10 Miami. So, the other schools, that would be a big anomaly from the past. Specific to Indiana, they do have, for the teams that didn't have elite recruiting, the 4 outliers we talked about, including Michigan with J.J. McCarthy, Indiana does have that elite quarterback who is going to be taken at least in the top 12. Fernando Mendoza is likely to go number 1, in fact. If not number 1, it'll be 2 or 3. So that is helping Indiana, overcome some of this supposed talent deficit here. But again, it would be very unprecedented. The other thing to say, I think that this data for Indiana is why a lot of people in the South, and I live in Atlanta, they're more in tune with recruiting rankings, as gung-ho as they are about following their teams. It's why I think many in the South still don't believe 100% in Indiana. I know I'm kind of get that from my friends. Yeah, Indiana's good, but are they great, right? It speaks to the amazing job Kirk Cignetti and his staff done. It's also, I believe, why Indiana, and I'm going to talk to this later, they need to beat an SEC team for these SEC fans to really, truly believe. The other thing is, I just think it's going to be harder and harder with the transfer portal to evaluate year to year how good these teams are. So what that's going to mean is the AP top 25 rankings, which we all don't love in the first place, they're going to be worse, much worse than they've been in the past, where, you're going to look at the AP preseason top 10, and there's going to be many more teams that will fall out of the top 25, let alone falling out of the top 10. So AP top 25 is going to be less and less reliable with the transfer portal. All right, so that was the third topic. Going to back out of here. We got one more topic to cover. I want to talk about how and prioritize the bowl games, right? So the Washington game already happened, but I'm not going to count that. But, most of these rankings that you're going to see here, and I do have a table for those watching on YouTube, but we'll walk you through it. I talked about earlier how the Big Ten done in the bowl games matters a lot for Big Ten perceptions. And so I'm going to rank these. Obviously, also, this rankings is going to be dependent a lot on whether playoff games are going to matter, and then the SEC versus Big Ten matchups are going to matter quite a bit for importance. So, all right, so number one, I'm saying is the Indiana game in the quarterfinals. They're going to play either Alabama or Oklahoma, right? So both of those are SEC teams. But a couple reasons here. If the number one team in the nation, which is Indiana, loses in their first playoff game, it really puts into question how good was the Big Ten all along if your number one team and the Big Ten champion loses, in their first playoff game. That would look really bad. And then number two is that factor I talked about earlier as far as SEC teams truly believing in Indiana. I just think, the fact that Indiana beat Oregon and Ohio State, for SEC fans, they're like, that's great, but those are still Big Ten teams that are maybe kind of overrated in the first place. So, Indiana, it's going to be so important for them to beat that Bama or Oklahoma to really show that they're legit top 5 teams. And man, if they could thump those two teams and really dominate them, that would be just so huge for the Big Ten, I'm telling you. So that's the number one game for sure. Number two, I'm giving Ohio State in the quarterfinals. It's going to be either Miami or Texas A&M. Obviously, if it's A&M, that's against an SEC team, so that would magnify the importance of this game for the Big Ten. I just think because they're ranked so high, similar to Indiana, it would look extremely bad for the conference if Ohio State, given how great the defense is being talked up, et cetera, a Heisman finalist and Julian saying if they lose in their first playoff game, that would be really bad. So number two is Ohio State. And just on Ohio State topic, the fact Indiana or Ohio State beat some SEC teams on the way to winning the national title, I think the SEC fans are believers in Ohio State more than Indiana, from the factor of Indiana hasn't beaten that big-time SEC team yet. All right, number three, I'm going Oregon in the quarterfinals. I believe it's going to be Texas Tech. Oregon needs to prove themselves given the loss to Ohio State and then the loss to Indiana. So that one's a big deal. Number four, I'm going with Iowa. So Iowa is a 5.5 point, according to FanDuel, 5.5 point underdog to Vanderbilt. So of course this is Big Ten versus SEC, but also think about it. If number 23 ranked Iowa beats number 14 Vandy, which many think should have been a playoff team, that's huge for Big Ten versus SEC perception. It also combats the perception that the Big Ten is not nearly as deep as the SEC, right? So that would be a big deal for Iowa if they could win that game. So that's number four. Number five, I'm giving Illinois. So Illinois is a 2.5 point FanDuel underdog to Tennessee. Tennessee, a former top 25 team, just like Illinois was. Illinois really would signify as an underdog winning. The Big Ten's mid-tier teams are just as good as the SEC, if not better. And also what's interesting about this game, this opened as a 5.5 point spread for Illinois. Now it's down to 2.5. So money is flowing to Illinois and Brett Bielema. Number six is important. I'm giving the Michigan as a 7.5-point FanDuel underdog to Texas. I would rank this higher versus those other SEC versus Big Ten matchups. I only rank it lower because, the coaching upheaval with Sharon Moore. I just think that the Big Ten, if we lose this one, we won't get dinged as much, right? People will be like, well, yeah, Michigan that would be a hard one to win with all the, the coaching situation. So I just give it a little bit lower ranking, but it's still important. It still matters a lot, believe me. This line has also moved. It opened as Michigan as a 5.5-point dog, so probably due to the coaching issues, right? It's moved up to 7.5 points according to FanDuel. So that one's going the opposite way of the Illinois one. Number 7 here, Oregon versus James Madison. So, I already mentioned Oregon in the quarterfinal game. I'm giving this 7 for Oregon just because I'm assuming Oregon is going to win the game for sure. So just number 7, just because it would be terrible for the Big Ten, obviously, if James Madison sprung that upset. So that leaves number 8. I'm going with USC. USC as a 5.5-point FanDuel favorite over the Big 12's TCU. This would be a bad look for the Big Ten, a ranked team to lose to an unranked TCU. And then number 9 importance, Penn State as a 3.5-point underdog to Clemson. This is the craziest game. Think about it. These two teams came in before the year. If you said, yeah, Penn State's going to play Clemson in, the postseason, people will be like, of course. Yeah, it'll be, maybe in the championship game, the semifinals. No, it's in the Pinstripe Bowl game, right? Pinstripe Bowl in New York. 2 unranked teams. Just crazy, right? If you would have said this before to start the year, but it's still important. It still would be great for Penn State to go out with a win. Number 10, Nebraska, huge underdog. In fact, the biggest underdog next to Oregon here for the Big Ten. Utah is a FanDuel 16.5-point favorite over Nebraska. Really low expectations for the Huskers. So if they sprung an upset, be huge for the Big Ten. And then the final 2, and then this is relative, right? It doesn't say it's not important, but someone has to end up last. Number 11, I say Minnesota. They're favored by 2.5 over New Mexico, who's actually a pretty good team. They played some tough teams this year, including UCLA. I'm giving that the 11. And then number 12 and last is Northwestern, a 10.5-point favorite over Central Michigan. So at minimum, they should win this game. They're a MAC team. So I'm putting that as last there. So again, just Indiana, by far the most important. Them doing well in the playoffs is really going to say, wow, if Indiana's that good, and then Penn State gets the right coach and Michigan, hires someone to replace Moore and gets back to their good ways. You already have Ohio State acting like a blue blood as they should. Oregon's doing the same. I've had a mantra for a conference to be strong. You need your blue bloods acting like blue bloods. But if you have a school like Indiana acting like a new blue blood, if you will, would be just such a huge thing for the Big Ten. So that's pretty much it for the week for me. Enjoy the games. Did want to mention my son and I will be watching. He goes to Kennesaw State. So they play Friday, 11 a.m. Eastern time against Western Michigan in the Myrtle Beach Bowl. Would have been about a 6-hour drive for us, but we decided against. So hopefully Kennesaw State comes through for them. Final thing, Big Jeff wishes all of you a Merry Christmas. And as always, thank you for your support for the Big Ten Huddle, and bye for now.